I'm Ethan. I'm 27. I work in UX design, mostly freelance stuff for app startups. After 2 years living in Seattle, I moved back to my hometown in New Jersey last month. Cheaper rent, closer to my family, and honestly, I just needed to reset. Too much noise, too much pressure. I figured it was time to be somewhere that felt more like home. Anyway, when I got back, my best friend Jordan was one of the first people to hit me up. We grew up together, went to the same high school, did dumb stuff in college, drifted apart a bit after I moved, but still messaged here and there. He texted me, "Back in town, then you're coming to this little thing I'm throwing. Friday, no excuses." So I went. It wasn't anything fancy, maybe 15 or 20 people, mostly his co-workers and mutuals from back in the day. I showed up with a bottle of wine I didn't even know how to pronounce, said hi to a bunch of familiar faces, and then he introduced me to her. "This is my, he said, kind of offhand, his arm casually around her waist. "My girlfriend Sophia, this is Ethan. He's basically my brother." She smiled, not in that fake party way, like she actually saw me. "Nice to meet you, Ethan. I've heard him about you." She didn't say it with sarcasm, no weird tone, just calm. She had dark eyes, not mysterious or seductive, just so honest. And she didn't talk like someone who needed to impress anyone. You could tell she was the kind of person who listened more than she spoke. And when she did speak, she meant every word. The night went on. People drank more. The music got louder. I stepped outside for a bit, needed some air. The backyard was quiet. It overlooked the woods, and the porch lights barely reached the edge of the trees. I stood there just zoning out, trying to remember why I left Seattle in the first place. A few minutes later, the door slid open and she stepped out. Sophia. She had a beer in her hand and no jacket on, just a loose sweater that hung off her shoulder a little. "Mind if I join?" she asked. "Sure," I said. We stood there in silence for a moment. It wasn't awkward. It was nice. "You don't seem like someone who enjoys parties," she said, looking straight ahead. I laughed. "I used to. Not so much anymore. I think I burned out." She nodded. Jordan said, "You've been in Seattle for a while. Why'd you come back?" "Long story," I said. She didn't push. Instead, she said, "I've never been to Seattle." "It rains a lot," I said. She smiled. "I like the rain." We started talking about everything and nothing. Music, childhood memories, how weird it is that you could be surrounded by people and still feel completely out of place. I don't know how we got there, but I remember saying something like, "Sometimes I think I just need to start over somewhere new again. Keep moving until something feels right." She looked at me for a second and said, "Or until someone feels right." I didn't respond. Eventually, someone opened the door and yelled, "Sophia, Jordan is looking for you!" She gave me a quick glance, not flirty, not guilty, just like she wanted to say something but didn't. "Back to reality," she said with a soft smile. As she turned to leave, she paused for half a second and looked over her shoulder. "You're not what I expected," she said. Then she disappeared back inside. I stood there for a while longer, staring at the edge of the woods, thinking. I told myself it was nothing. She's with Jordan, my best friend. It was just a talk, just a moment. That's it. I believed that until I didn't. Over the next couple of weeks, I kept seeing Sophia, not intentionally, not like that. It was just Jordan invited me to everything, and she was always there. Game nights, casual dinners, a random Sunday football thing. At first, I tried to stay on the other side of the room, talk to other people, keep it safe. But sometimes she'd find her way over and we'd talk. Nothing intense, just comfortable. She had this way of asking real questions without making it weird, like she actually cared about the answers. One night, Jordan threw a little dinner for a few people from his job. After dessert, he leaned over and said, "Hey, why don't you stick around? Help clean up. Would you mind dropping Sophia off at her place? It's on your way. I paused just for a second, but nodded. Yeah, sure. When we got in the car, it was already dark. She buckled up and stared ahead. We didn't talk at first, just silence and the hum of the engine. After a few blocks, she said, "You always drive like that." Like what? I asked, glancing over. Like you're never in a rush to be anywhere. I smiled. Maybe I'm not. She looked out the window. That's rare. Most people are always running. There was a quiet pause, then she turned toward me again. Can I ask you something personal? Sure. Are you happy here coming back? That question sat heavy in the air. I shrugged. I don't know yet. It feels familiar, but sometimes familiar isn't the same as good. She nodded. Yeah, sometimes it feels more like a trap. I didn't expect that. I glanced over, but she was still looking straight ahead. Then she asked, Did you leave Seattle because of someone? I hesitated. Not exactly. I think I left because of myself. I didn't like who I was becoming out there. That's honest, she said, then added quietly, Most people stay even when they hate it. As we pulled up to her building, I parked and left the engine running. She unbuckled her seatbelt but didn't move. You know what's strange? She said, What? Sometimes it feels like I'm in a movie, but I didn't write the script. I'm just playing a part someone else cast me in. I didn't know what to say to that, so I didn't say anything. She looked over at me for a second too long. Then she smiled faintly. Anyway, thanks for the ride. She opened the door and stepped out. Before closing it, she leaned down and said, If I ever vanish, it won't be without reason. Then she shut the door and walked inside. I sat there for a minute watching the building. There was no romance in what happened. No lingering touches, no confessions, no lines crossed, but something was changing. I could feel it. And I think she could too, not the kind of change that happens overnight. The slow, quiet kind, the kind that builds day by day, word by word, almost nothing happened. And yet somehow it felt like everything did. Jordan's birthday came up about 3 weeks later. He turned 28. And of course, he threw a party, not one of those loud, wild things. He's not that guy, but the kind where people drift in and out all night. Music's always playing somewhere in the background, and there's always someone offering you another drink. I got there a bit late, walked in, and immediately noticed Sophia across the room. She was wearing a simple black dress, not flashy, not trying to stand out, but she looked incredible. Her hair was pinned back loosely, and she was holding a glass of white wine, listening to someone talk and nodding politely. I said hi to Jordan first. He was already a little tipsy, arms wide open when he saw me. There he is! He shouted, throwing one arm around me. My man, my brother took you long enough. You're getting old, I said. Wiser, he replied, grinning. 30 is knocking, but I'm not answering yet. We laughed, clinked drinks, the usual. He introduced me to a few of his work friends I hadn't met yet. But even while I smiled and nodded through the small talk, my eyes kept drifting back to her. She didn't seek me out. She didn't wave, but I knew she felt it too. Later that night, Jordan made a toast. He stood on one of the steps by the kitchen and raised his glass. Everyone gathered, to old friends, to new ones, and to the women who somehow love us, even when we don't deserve it. Laughter filled the room. Then he added, especially the ones who are way out of our league, like my girl Sophia. He turned and gave her a quick kiss. People clapped. I looked away. Something about it felt off, like he was saying the right words, performing affection, but not really seeing her, not really present with her. She smiled, sure, but it didn't reach her eyes, at least not from where I stood. Later, I stepped into the kitchen for some water. The music had shifted slower, softer. Most of the guests were in the living room, some outside by the fire pit. The house had that late party energy, cozy, dim, bust. That's when I felt someone step behind me. I didn't turn around immediately, I just knew. In her voice, quiet, calm, certain, she said, "He's drunk. Everyone's distracted." I turned to face her. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't nervous either. "Sophia," I started, but she gently interrupted. "Meet me after," she said. No inflection, no flirtation, just a request. She held my gaze for a second longer, then turned and walked back out toward the hallway like nothing had happened. I stood there for a while holding a glass I hadn't even filled. I don't remember much of the next hour, just noise, movement, blurred conversations, people saying goodbye, Jordan hugging everyone too tightly, someone putting on 90s music. Eventually, I slipped out without saying anything. I sat in my car 10 minutes 15. The windows fogged slightly. I turned the engine on, then off again. Then I got out. She wasn't waiting outside. I didn't expect her to be, but as I walked around to the back of the house, the same backyard where we first talked, I saw her standing near the edge of the porch, arms folded, staring into the trees. She turned when she heard me. We didn't say anything at first. The silence wasn't awkward, it was weighty, like everything we hadn't said until now was sitting in the space between us. Finally, I spoke. "This doesn't feel right." She nodded. "It doesn't." Pause. "But it doesn't feel wrong either." That part I couldn't deny. "I don't want to hurt him," I said. "He's my friend." "I know," she said softly. "I don't want to hurt anyone. I'm just so tired, Ethan." I looked at her. She wasn't putting on a show. She looked exhausted in a quiet, emotional way. Not from the night, from everything. She looked down at her hands and back up. "You ever feel like you're living someone else's life?" I nodded slowly. She took a breath. "I didn't ask you here to do anything. I needed you to know." "Know what?" She stepped a little closer, and that it's not about thrill or attention or whatever people think it is. It's that with you, I can breathe, that's all. We didn't kiss, no touching, no crossing any line, we just stood there. I wanted to say something meaningful, something honest, but nothing came. Eventually, she said, "I'm going to head in." She looked at me one more time. "Good night, Ethan." And then she walked inside. I stood in the backyard alone for a while until the chill finally pushed me to leave. On the drive home, I replayed every second of that moment in my head over and over. There was no affair, no betrayal, not yet, but something was shifting, something already had. The next few days were strange. I didn't text Sophia. I didn't text Jordan either. I went to work, kept my head down, buried myself in UI projects I'd been putting off for weeks. Anything to stay busy, to stay away from the mess I felt forming under the surface. But the silence didn't fix anything. If anything, it made it worse. I kept replaying her words from that night. "With you, I can breathe." The way she looked at me, the way she didn't ask for anything. She just needed someone to see her. And I did. God help me. I did. That Friday evening, Jordan called. "You alive?" he joked. "Haven't heard from you since the party." I kept my voice steady. "Yeah, just working a lot." "Fair enough." He said, "Hey, Sophia said she might be late tonight. She's visiting her sister or something. You want to come over and watch the game?" I lied and said I had a deadline. He didn't push. That was the last time we spoke normally. The next morning, I got a message from Sophia. Just one sentence. "I told him." I stared at my screen, unsure what she meant exactly. I didn't know if she told him everything or just that something wasn't right between them. Either way, I knew things were about to change for all of us. I replied, "Wumti, how did he take it?" A few minutes passed before she sent, Worse than I thought, but maybe it had nothing to do with me. Later that evening, I got the whole story. They had argued not the kind of argument that explodes, the kind that bleeds out slowly, the kind where two people realize they've been pretending for too long. She had asked him if he felt like they were still connected, if he ever wondered whether they were just holding on out of routine. He said, "If you're asking that, then maybe you already made up your mind." She didn't respond. She didn't cry either. She just looked at him, and then he asked, "Is there someone else?" She paused. He stared at her. She didn't say yes, but she didn't say no either. That was enough. He stood up, grabbed his keys, said something like, "You could have just left me instead of going behind my back," and walked out. Sophia moved out 2 days later. She stayed at her sister's place for a bit. She packed her things in silence while Jordan sat in the living room, eyes locked on the TV, pretending not to watch her every move through the reflection. He never yelled, never begged, he just let it happen. And when it was done, he texted me, "I'm assuming you already know." That was it. No anger, no insult, just quiet disappointment. I didn't respond. I didn't know how. A week later, Sophia and I met at a small coffee shop on the edge of town, neutral ground. It was cold outside, but she came in without a coat, just a thick sweater and scarf wrapped twice around her neck. She sat across from me, hands wrapped around a paper cup. Neither of us touched our drinks. "I don't expect anything," she said. "I just didn't want you to hear it from someone else." "Are you okay?" I asked. She nodded slowly. "I don't know. Maybe. Maybe not. But I'm not pretending anymore. That counts for something." I leaned back, unsure what to say. Finally, I asked, "So what now?" She shrugged. "Now I figure out how to start from zero without lying to myself, without hurting people, or at least trying not to." She hesitated, then looked me in the eye. "I didn't leave him for you, Ethan. That wouldn't be fair to either of us. I left because I was gone long before you showed up again. I just didn't want to admit it." I nodded. "I get it." Another pause, but she added, "I hope I haven't lost you too." That line sat in the air like a question with no obvious answer. I looked at her, really looked at her. She wasn't polished or composed or in control. She looked tired, honest, free in a way I hadn't seen before. And for the first time since I got back to this town, I felt like I wasn't alone in what I was feeling. I reached across the table and placed my hand on hers. Nothing dramatic, no kiss, no scene. Just that. Her fingers curled around mine, and we just sat there, hands clasped, coffee untouched, letting the silence say everything else. Later that night, I got another text from Jordan. Just 2 words, "Be happy." I didn't reply. I didn't know if I deserved that grace or if he meant it. Maybe both. But I saved the message, not because it made me feel better, but because it reminded me how things break quietly. Not with screaming, but with stillness, with choices, and once they break, they don't go back. 2 months later, the dust had settled. Sophia found a small 1-bedroom apartment not far from downtown. It was quiet on the 2nd floor of a brick building with a laundromat underneath and an old bakery next door. I helped her carry boxes the first weekend she moved in. She didn't ask, I just showed up. She opened the door, saw me standing there, and nodded like she'd been expecting it, like it would have been strange if I hadn't. We weren't officially together. There was no label, no announcement, no rush. But we saw each other a few times a week. Dinner at her place, walks, talks that started simple and ended up deep always. It was different than anything I'd known before. No games, no fireworks, just a calm sort of presence that stayed with you even after you left. One night we sat on her small couch with the window cracked open and a record humming in the background. She rested her head on my shoulder, her feet tucked beneath her, and said almost to herself, "It's strange how quiet things are when they're real." I knew exactly what she meant. Jordan and I hadn't spoken since that last text, "Be happy." We still had mutual friends. I saw his name on a few group chats, heard he'd started dating again. Some girl he met at the gym. People said he seemed okay, focused, calmer maybe. I didn't reach out, not because I didn't care, but because I respected the silence. He deserved that space. We both did. We had built a friendship over decades. But not all things survive every season. Some grow apart quietly. Some break when neither person is entirely wrong. But the situation just changes. And this one had changed beyond repair. One Sunday morning, Sophia and I went out for coffee. We sat on a bench outside the shop, watching people walk by, bundled up in winter coats. A little kid ran past, chasing a balloon. A dog barked from across the street. Life just going on. She looked over at me suddenly, not smiling, just sincere. "Do you ever wish we'd met differently?" I thought about it. "Sometimes," I said, "but if we had, maybe we wouldn't be who we are now." She nodded. "True. Maybe I needed to go through all of that to even recognize this." "This?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. She reached over and took my hand, holding it in the middle of her lap like it belonged there. "This," she said, "the kind of love that doesn't demand anything, that just exists, even when it's messy, even when it hurts." I didn't say anything for a moment. I just let her words settle. Then I said the one thing I had held back for weeks. "I was in love with you before I even admitted it to myself." She looked down, smiling faintly. "I knew." I laughed softly. "Of course you did. We didn't move in together. We didn't get engaged. There was no grand ending, no cinematic kiss in the rain, just two people choosing each other day by day, quietly, respectfully. We kept our distance from drama from the past. We didn't look back unless we had to." Sometimes she'd talk about Jordan, not often and never with malice, just in passing. A part of her story she didn't need to erase, just move forward from. I respected that. She never made me feel like a replacement, and I never treated her like a rescue. We were just us. Simple, steady, real. One night I asked her if she regretted anything. She thought for a long time before answering. "I regret not being honest sooner with him, with myself. But not you. Never you." I believed her. That was the thing with Sophia. She didn't speak unless it mattered. And when it did, it mattered deeply. Months turned into a year. We weren't loud about our relationship. People figured it out eventually. Some were supportive, some judged, some stayed quiet. It didn't matter. What mattered was that every time I looked at her, I didn't feel guilt. I felt peace. I knew it had cost something. Her relationship, my friendship, our reputations in some eyes. But that's the thing about real love. It doesn't come clean. It comes honest, with cracks, with scars, with history you can't rewrite. And still it comes. That night, as we sat on a fire escape watching the city fall asleep, I turned to her and said, "You knew I was his friend and still said meet me after." She didn't flinch. She looked at me without blinking and replied, "Because I needed it to finally be real." And it was. That was the truth. That was how it ended. Not with regret, but with choice. Ethan and Sophia's story unveils a profound life lesson. True love often blossoms from the bravery to confront our deepest truths, even if it shatters familiar bonds and demands heart-wrenching sacrifices. Ethan's return home wasn't merely a geographical shift. It was a soul-searching quest for authenticity, only to ignite a connection that tested his loyalty to his lifelong friend, Jordan. Sophia's quiet resolve to abandon a stagnant relationship mirrors the raw courage needed to reject complacency, embracing vulnerability over pretense. This narrative reminds us that genuine connections aren't born in perfection, but in the messy aftermath of honest choices, where silence speaks volumes and healing begins in shared stillness. It's a testament to the human spirit's resilience, urging us to prioritize self-honesty, even when it costs friendships or comfort. In real life, such moments redefine us, teaching that love worth having is love that sets us free, scars and all. Have you ever navigated a painful decision for the sake of truth or love? Share your heartfelt story in the comments below. We'd truly love to connect over your experiences. If this tale stirred your emotions, smash that subscribe button and join our community for more inspiring, soul-touching stories. Let's build meaningful conversations together.